Hey guys, Shane here, so welcome to this Sherman build video. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at painting, weathering and adding final details to Asuka Model's 135th M4A1 Direct Vision. So we're going to be in work on the tracks. So I've base coated these tracks in German grey, and I'm going to lay a dry brush layer of Panzer Ace's Afrika Korps Tankers uniform. And I'm going to apply this quite messily. I don't really mind if it's neat or not. And this is going to simulate dust and wear and tear on these rubber track blocks, as well as adding some highlights to the metal guide teeth. I'm further going to add some more detail to the metal guide teeth for these tracks by using Model Air gunmetal grey. And I'm just going to really focus it at the very tops of each tooth on the tracks, just to bring a bit of a metallic shine. So I'm going to take some Panzer Ace's DAC uniform plus some flat black, and I'm going to start stippling this colour onto the rubber track pads. And this is going to simulate the original rubber coming through the grime and dirt from friction. I'm just using a piece of packing sponge to stipple this on. So with the tracks allowed to dry, now we're going to start moving on to some oil modulation. And we're going to be using the 502 base colour modulation set. And we're going to thin these oil paints roughly 80% thinner to 20% oil paint. Again, I'm using Arctic's White Spirits for this. So I'm going to remove the majority of this filter from my brush and begin to pick out individual panels of the Sherman in various different colours. You can see I have a piece of paper handy here just to remove the excess. And I'm just going to pick a different colour for various different panels. And it's just going to create a very, very subtle tint to each panel and just add a bit of tonal variation to otherwise boring looking vehicle. Again, this is not a wash, so I don't want to put down a very heavy layer of this tint. As you can see, it's so subtle you can barely see it. However, that's the general idea. If you want to add more to the effect, you can add multiple layers, but again, let each layer dry and ensure that they're very smooth and there's no pooling allowed to build up. And again, you don't have to do this on every plate of the model. You can leave as many plates as you want untouched. And we're moving the same technique onto the turret. Again, just picking out various plates that I want to add a slight different hue of colour to. So with the oil filter is allowed to dry for 24 hours, now I'm going to start adding an oil dot filter. This is going to be done in a very more traditional way, and I'm going to be just using sap green, yellow ochre, dark blue and white. Again, I'm going to put some of these oil colours onto a scrap piece of cardboard just to take some of the excess oil out of them. So I'm going to prepare the model surface by moistening it with white spirit, and I'm going to take a cocktail stick and start applying dots of these colours. Again, since this is meant to be a desert vehicle, I kind of want some more lighter tones to simulate dust streaking as well as being sun bleached by the Tunisian sun in the case of this Sherman. Now taking a separate clean brush that's been dipped in white spirit, again not soaked but just moist with white spirit, we're going to start pulling these dots in a vertical motion. Again, it looks like a bit of a mess here. However, if you keep cleaning your brush off and keep working these streaks again in a vertical manner, they will become less and less stark and fade away slowly. And you just want to get the hint of these streaks, so we don't want it too intense. And we're moving on the exact same technique on the hull. I'm going to focus quite a bit with the white dots, again to simulate dust and sun bleaching. And I'm going to put them down kind of heavy in places and then blend them back. And I just take my time and slowly work it back. Again, I want this to be very subtle, and I don't want it to pool in any places, so I'm being very careful not to over thin this area or allow any runoff to create tide marks and what have you. So with the dot filter allowed to dry for a weekend, I'm going to start moving on to doing some pin washes, and for this we're going to use AK's 502 Octilong's Shadow Brown. Again, I'm going to tin it pretty heavy, but not as heavily as we tinned our filter. And I'm going to have another shot glass full of just clean white spirits. So I'm going to prepare the model surface with some clean white spirits and then take our wash and use the capillary action of different panel lines and any engraved detail. And I'm just going to touch a fine bristled brush to these areas and let the capillary action pull the wash in. So again, you see me here dampening the area with white spirits and then coming in with a separate brush with our wash mixture. As well as the seam between the hull and the transmission itself, again just to add some shade and also help the eye see that they're two separate pieces. And I'm going to do this on every rivet, every bolt and any raised detail that has an edge that I want to pick out, like you can see here on this engine deck. It looks a bit heavy in places. Again, we can always come back with a clean brush with white spirit and blend all this back if it's too stark for us. I'm going to start working on the commander's cupola as well as some of the other turret fittings, and it's exactly the same. I just prepare the surface by moistening it with white spirit to break the surface tension, and then I just start touching a fine tip brush to the areas I want to wash and allow the capillary action to pull the wash into the model. So with our pin wash allowed to fully dry, we're going to start adding some chips to the model, and for this we're going to use Vallejo German Camo Black Brown, and I'm just going to use a 00 round brush from Winsor & Newton Cottonin, and I've just thinned this paint ever so slightly, and I'm just going to start touching this colour onto some of the sharper details of this model. I don't want to over chip this model, less is more, but I'm just going to focus around the driver and co-driver hoods, as well as any other area I feel where the crew would be moving and basically peeling back the paint with abrasion. And I keep moving the brush in different angles. I don't want to form any regular shapes here, because that's not how chipping works. So again, keep that in mind, keep moving the angle of your brush, and I'm just doing them in tapping motions and just letting the chip form itself. The only place I'm going to really use sponge chipping is on the fenders, and I find on straight edges using the sponge chipping method works pretty well. So for the wooden parts, we're going to be using Vallejo Model Color Cork Brown, and for the metallics such as the pickaxe and shovel and what have you, we're going to be using German Camo Black Brown. And then to give us a very basic and simple wood grain effect, I'm going to apply a very heavy layer of Agrat's Earthshade in a kind of stippling motion. And I'm also going to give the metallic areas a wash of Citadel's Null Oil. So to give these metal tools a bit of actually a metallic sheen, I'm going to take a graphite pencil or a graphite stick, and I'm just going to do like an edge highlight. I'm just going to pick out the sharp edges. I'm just going to add a little bit of rust effect to the shovel by using Model Air Orange Rust. This is the only place I'm going to put any rust on the model. How I do the parkerization for my M1919 and 50 cal machine guns. So I based them in German grey, and then I give them a dry brush of Vallejo neutral grey. And that gives us that kind of blue tint that these machine guns have. And then just to give them a metallic sheen, I give them a wash of Citadel's Null Oil, which gives it that kind of metallic, oily sheen. So I'm going to take some Mod Podge, or you can also use any white glue for this, and we're going to install the clear plastic headlight lenses. Again, I'm just going to use a piece of cocktail stick with a bit of blue tack just to help mount these in properly. If you get a bit of Mod Podge on the front of the lens, I just take a brush, dip it in water and just clean away the excess. It's very simple. So to give it that Tunisian look, I'm going to give it my Sherman an oil rack, and for that I'm going to use Vallejo Olive Green, Olive Drab and Dark Yellow, kind of mix them together in different ratios, and I'm going to spray it with the airbrush. Now I did notice that my PSI was way too high, it was something like 25 PSI, which was way too powerful and too strong for what I needed. So I quickly reduced my PSI to about 15. So I'm just going to take some model color ghost grey, and I'm just going to paint in the white cross to denote this jerry can here. It doesn't have to be perfect, I'll even add some paint stains and paint streaks just to give it a bit of character. Again, I'm not being too careful on how heavy I go here, but I keep altering the angle in which I'm dabbing just to create kind of a random pattern. And then I'm going to give each jerry can a focused wash of Citadel's Agrat's Earthshade, and I'm just going to basically put this into every recess and every crevice and each cap. And what I like about using Agrat's Earthshade for this, it gives it a very grimy and oily appearance as we would expect from a jerry can. So I decided I'd add some basic tarps and stowage, and for this we're going to use green stuff or neotite. And we're going to mix the two A and B components of this two-part epoxy putty together. Now I mix up way too much than what I needed, but I'm going to mix them in equal measure until they turn green. And the best way to do is keep twisting it, pulling it apart and folding it on top of itself until you get a solid green colour, then you know your mixture is ready to go. I'm taking an old sheet of glass here and I'm going to cover my surface in water, and that's going to prevent the putty from sticking. And then I was taking an old stainless steel scalpel holder, and that's going to be my rolling pin. And I'm just going to roll out some very basic tarps and blankets. I'm just taking an old Stanley blade here, and I'm just going to square off the edges and prepare to install on the tank. Now I applied mine directly onto the model. They will stick in place, however if you want to shape them to the model without them being permanent so you can paint them separately, I would recommend using cling film or kitchen film. Put that over your model surface and then put the putty down, and when it dries you can remove it and paint it separately. However, I didn't think of that at the time, so I'm just going to paint mine in situ, and for that I'm just going to use Vallejo model colour Russian uniform. I'm also going to use the number 1 DAC colour from the Panzer Aces range, and I'm just going to mix them all together to get various different tones of khaki. Again, I'm taking special care to ensure that there's no green showing through from the putty. And then I take the highlight colour from Panzer Aces DAC uniform and mix it with my Russian uniform, and that's how I'm going to do my basic highlight. I'm not using any washes for these tarps, and I'm going to do the highlight using a stippling motion to give it a bit of a fabric appearance. So now I'm going to give the model a coat of dust, and for this we're going to use Tamiya XF57 buff. And I've very heavily thinned this, and I've turned my PSI pressure right down to about 12 PSI. And I'm going to very slowly begin to build up this dust. You could use pigments for this, but I find using the airbrushes gives far more control than pigment. And with that, our Sherman is complete and ready for the display shelf. So I really hope you found this video enjoyable and maybe give you a few ideas for any of your armour builds in the future. And this has been a really interesting project, especially doing the yellow air recognition panel on the roof. It's something very different and it really does stand out in the collection. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found it enjoyable and give you a few ideas for your own builds. Big thank you to my Patreons that help make all this content possible, so thank you for your support. And if you guys want to help out the channel, do follow the link in the description. So thank you so much guys for watching. Happy modelling, keep being awesome, and I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye.